YouTube Live on Monday, which was Memorial Day. So if you were expecting a live, I'm so sorry. It is Tuesday and bright and early, we have so much going on. Tell me where you're logging in from, where you're watching a replay from in the comments because it is a morning. And there was a lot of news over the past few days. So let's get into some of the things that happened and some of the sort of showboating. I'm going to call it showboating because that's what I think the president was doing over the weekend when it pertains to stories that come up around Harvard. So let's get into that. First, let's go with this one. Trump administration to cancel federal contracts with Harvard worth about $100 million. Now, there is a little sub here that says this is the latest barb against the school as it refuses to bend to the White House's policy demands. Now, if you've been paying attention, the first sort of university clash that happened was with Columbia University, and it was really over those protests that were demonstrations regarding Palestine, Palestinians, the Gaza Strip, and Israel. Okay, and that was sort of the first wave of the Trump administration's going after universities. Now, Columbia capitulated. They were very quick to say, oh no, what do you need, right? The next was the Harvard University. Now, when we think about Harvard and we think about the sort of prestige of the university, apparently there are reports that Barron Trump did not get accepted into Harvard and that this might be the sort of pretense for why Trump is so adamant about going after Harvard. Now, he has been stating through his sort of policies that he does not want any sort of hint of DEI, blah, 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 to be anywhere within the curriculum at Harvard or any university that has funding coming from the federal government. But this is the sort of pettiness that he is stooping down to. He has basically said, we don't want Harvard to have any access to have enrollment of foreign students, and so they did a countersuit. They sued the administration. Because they said that is illegal for you to just blatantly say you cannot enroll any foreign students because there is a process for going through taking away that sort of right and that sort of ability for Harvard. And so because the Trump administration did not go through that process to prove whatever it was that they were claiming, Harvard went to the judges and said, excuse me, we have standing here and that is unlawful. And the judges granted an injunction here. So they do not have to stop enrolling foreign students for the time being. And in response to that, this is from today, the administration is going to cancel federal contracts with Harvard worth about $100 million. Now, I want your opinion about this sort of tit for tat back and forth that is happening between the Trump administration about foreign students and Harvard, because it seems like there is something underneath the surface here, something that is lying underneath the surface for why they're going so hard at Harvard and not at the majority of other institutions. I know that there were some sort of abrupt key words that were used when they were talking about taking away DEI in certain universities and certain colleges, and so a lot of people who were doing research basically had no way of reporting their research because they were taking away the ability to use phrases like bias or gender or things of that nature. And so those were impacting students' how do you say that? Students' research and reporting ability, in addition to faculty and their teaching ability for having to basically not say certain words or not report certain words within studies. That was the first sort of wave within, shockwaves within university systems. This is all about money, though. He keeps saying, I'm going to take the money. I'm going to keep taking the money. And so this is a very interesting sort of way to force the hand of Harvard, except Harvard does have a lot of money. Now, do they get a lot of their money from foreign students? Absolutely. And so I think that this is kind of one of those moments where, does Harvard cave? I don't think so. I want to know your opinion though, because this is sort of the judge's ruling when it came down to whether or not they were going to allow Harvard to continue allowing Harvard to enroll students that were from foreign countries. Bonjour, Vivian. How are you? Good. I guess it's good afternoon for you. You are what, 9 hours or so ahead of me. So have a happy Tuesday. And this was the sort of judge's stance on that. And it's like it's a temporary halt to the government's ban on Harvard's ability to enroll international students. Now, over the weekend, I wanted to find the quote because it was a very interesting one from Donald Trump. I screenshotted it, so I wanted to show you exactly what he was talking about because it's just kind of like, what? That's kind of what when I read it, I was like, what? Okay, so I think this is it. It says, quote, we want to know who those foreign students are, a reasonable request since we give Harvard billions of dollars. But Harvard isn't exactly forthcoming, he continued. We want those names and countries. And what I said at the top of this is, he's showboating because Donald Trump, if he doesn't know it by now, Donald Trump has the ability to get those names. He does not need Harvard to tell him who is at Harvard and where they are from. And you know why? Because they were vetted to get a student visa, which means the Department of State, where Marco Rubio sits, and the Department of Homeland Security, where Kristi Noem sits, and all of those other agencies that use sort of I think it's the Student Visitor and Exchange Program, SVEP. And then there's another sort of process, which is the CVIS system. There is USCIS. I think it's USCIS now. All of those systems are housed in the federal government. So these students, where he's like, we want those names and countries, they have the names and they have the countries because they would not have been given a student visa without the names and the countries. So he's lying there when he says they're not being forthcoming, right? Because he has the ability to do a simple search, with those really great computers that Doge was trying to make more efficient. He has the ability, and he probably already has the list. So when he says we want those names and countries, he's lying because he has the names and the countries of all of the students who have been given student visas to go to Harvard. Yes, he does. And if he's saying that he doesn't, do not believe the lies coming out of his mouth, because in order to have a student visa, you have to be able to go through the student visa application process. And then they actually have to vet you. And then they actually have to give you permission to come into the United States. And then when you get into the United States, you have another sort of procedural to go through TSA. And they have to go, oh, hey, how do you have the right to be here? Oh, here's my student visa. I went to London. I went and studied at a college in London for about 3 months. In order to go to London, I had to have a student visa. I had to have permission to be there before I got there. I had to prove to the UK government that I could pay for my housing, that I already paid for my tuition, and that I had enough money in my bank account because I submitted my bank account records to say I could support myself financially while there for 3 months and even more, based on how much they said I should have in my bank account to cover all of my food and travel and expenses. They don't just say, hey, you want to study? You've been accepted? Come on down. That is not the process for getting a student visa. You have to prove that you're not going to come here and work. Okay? When you have a student visa, you cannot do those things because you have not been permitted to actually get a job to support yourself while you're in the country. So they have to prove that they can support themselves, that they have paid tuition, that they are able to eat and financially be sustainable without looking for a job. Okay, unless they have a specific visa that allows them to do some sort of like research or internship or whatever it is, they're not on another kind of visa. They have to prove financial sovereignty. And that's the thing that I think people forget, is that what, we're just giving away student visas to people? No, absolutely not. This is not the process that happens. So Yes, Vivian said summer from here. Absolutely. I mean, there are so many things that people have just been kind of like fluttering around as nonsense when it comes to student visa holders. And it's almost like he thinks that people will believe him because they don't do their own research, or because much of, I'm not going to say all, I'm going to say much of the population that is listening and consuming his content have not been a student in a foreign country before. So maybe they've never gone through that process before to actually understand what it takes to actually go to another country and study, and the requirements to come into the United States to study at such a prestigious university as Harvard. Now, granted, some of these student visa holders might have scholarships, right? They may have scholarships, but they still have to cover the rest of everything, because a lot of people, even if they have a full ride where they've got room and books and board and all the things, they still need money, right? They still have to buy their plane ticket to get here. They still have to have a return ticket. They don't just get to come here with like a one-time, like a one-way ticket. They have to show that they're going back at some point. And I know that a lot of people think that like it's just a willy-nilly process, but he knows better, and he is misleading the American public and specifically his audience to believe that they don't have the names and countries of all the people that go to Harvard. That's not how it works. Because if they overstay their student visa, now that's another thing. Have they been enforcing these sort of rules around student visas? Maybe they should look into Elon Musk, because that was a question that came up with Elon Musk and why he was here, I believe, on a student visa, and somehow he's still here. I don't think he's no longer on a student visa, but that would be a question. Maybe he would like to investigate why certain people are still here, right? But this is one of the ones that I wanted to tackle this morning, because it makes zero sense for him to grandstand in front of everybody and say, we don't have those names, we want those names. He already has the names. He absolutely has the names. And if people stop showing up, like let's say you are accepted into Harvard and you're a foreign student and you don't show up to class, the student like governments, like the sort of Harvard student visitor and exchange program, they will know that you're not showing up to class, right? That you just have disappeared off the face of the earth. Like they will start understanding, the teachers will start reporting you as not being there, okay? And if you're not there and you've paid for tuition, that's fine. But at some point, they're going to start reporting you as not being there, because they have an obligation too to say, this student showed up, he or she went to his dorm room, he or she went to their first class, and then they stopped showing up, because you get kicked out of universities if you don't make certain grades. Okay, I went to USC. I had to maintain, I think, a B plus in my doctorate program. It wasn't like you could get C's and D's and F's in the university institutions. You have to maintain a certain GPA when you're accepted into these sort of universities. And it's not like, and I'm not saying USC is Harvard, but it was hard to get into, right? For me in my doctorate program, we had to show up. If we weren't showing up, we were not going to be passing. There was no way to pass if you don't show up. So a lot of these institutions, they know when you're not there, and if you're not making the grades, you get kicked out, right? So it's not like all these students are just like, hey, we got our student visa, we're just roaming in, around the United States. No, if they don't make the grades, they don't pass and they get kicked out. So there are consequences to not showing up. Anyways, this was the one that I wanted to start with because it was so preposterous, but people believe what he says with like no accountability. All right, this is another one that I thought we should talk about, which is part of it. Foreign students at Harvard are taking US spots, okay? I don't know how people feel about this. Let me know in the comments what you think about whether or not Harvard's admissions policies are favoring, because I think it was like 27% of their population is foreign students, or is taken up by foreign students. Now, I'm not sure if this is standard across the board. Like maybe all, colleges and universities have 27%, or maybe it's a little bit of like a smaller percentage, but I'm not quite sure what it is across the board as far as a lot of the different sort of what is it called, the different universities and colleges. And I feel like even though they're taking 20% of the spots, that it's hard to get into Harvard. And for people to think that all of the smartest people who should be getting into Harvard are from the United States when we don't have 100% of the population of the world, that is just ignorance, because you want the best and the brightest. And my husband and I were talking about this today. We're talking about like all of the like really like the Ivy League schools, like even the ones that aren't in the Ivy League, like Stanford, and Caltech, and even like UCSD, I think is up there as far as like really great schools. There are even the UCLA. There are a lot of schools that are really great. MIT, a lot of great schools. Those schools are fighting for the cream of the crop. They are fighting for the top of the top, but they're not just fighting for the cream of the crop in the United States. They're fighting for the cream of the crop from around the world. Okay, so if you're getting the smartest of the smartest of the smartest of students, not just from the United States, but from around the world, that is going to increase your sort of academic standard. You're not just getting like the top of the top from the US and just being like, thank you, that's it. Because you know that there are smart people everywhere, not that there are just smart people here. And having all of those smart people converge in one place is so important because it challenges other people. If you're the smartest in your class and you have nobody pushing you, you are not going, unless you have the motivation yourself, that push is only going to come from you and maybe a little from your teachers. But if you have other students from other places pushing the boundaries and challenging you within your own sort of class, that's a whole other dynamic. And when people are coming from different backgrounds and different cultures and different systems of teaching and different ways of learning and converging on one campus, that is going to make for a much more dynamic learning environment than just only having students from one place. Like, we have the best, only put us in your universities. Like, really? We have the best of the United States, but there are the best of all of these other countries who might be better than you. I'm just saying, they might be smarter than you. They might have a better technique as far as learning style than you. They might have a better sort of delivery or research ability than you. And so what he's saying here is that U.S. people are missing out on spots in these top universities. And I don't think they're missing out on anything. I think they're taking the cream of the crop from the United States, and they are putting them in class with the top of the top from everywhere around the world. Now, is this where some people are missing out on spots? Maybe they weren't as good as someone else, and they didn't deserve the spot. So it's not about taking US spots. It's, were they deserving of a spot to begin with when they're competing not just with people from the United States? They're competing for those spots with people from everywhere. And I think that's where he gets this wrong. But you can leave me a comment about your thoughts about this, because it is what it is. This morning, there's a lot going on with the Diddy trial. The former assistant says he threatened her on her very first day. I don't know how you go back to a job like that. I mean, you might want to work in this industry, but there are a lot of people who would never, right? And I'm not saying this is her fault, but there are a lot of people, and not me included, who would never. It would be like my first and last day. It would be my first and last day. I don't know if this is like a sort of, how would you say, dream job for some people, but I'm not sure. Now, now what I would say, Joe Quintero, in a perfect world, this woman is living in a fantasy world. I live in reality. So I don't know if you're talking about me or if we're talking about this person in the Diddy trial, but The world is not that honorable. It's all about the money and power. I believe this of what you've said. And always love when people leave comments that are thoughtful. So I appreciate the last part of your comment because I'm not clueless. I do use my brain when I when I actually talk on here. But I do think that this is a very interesting comment about the money and the power. Now, why is it? And because if we're going to go back to what we were talking about with Donald Trump and Harvard, the money and the power, yes. I think he's on a power trip, though. I don't think that he is necessarily thinking about the sort of actions that will be taken to kind of counter his actions. And he will be put in his place by the people who are the best of the best of the best lawyers at Harvard that will say what you have done is unlawful, which is why they granted the injunction. All right, let's get into this story though, because Capricorn Clark, I feel like this is written like some sort of novel. I can't even imagine the names that have been coming out of this trial. Kid Cudi, Capricorn Clark, The Punisher, like all of the things. I'm just like blown away every time I'm looking at a name. So Kid Cudi was on the stand, I believe, last week. Capricorn Clark was testifying about some of the things this morning, I believe. Grueling hours as Combs' assistant led to stress-induced alopecia. If you remember during the slap heard around the world when we were talking about Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith, and she was talking about alopecia, this is what they're getting into as far as like this sort of condition. And it says that she typically worked from 9 a.m. till 4 a.m. without breaks for meals. I don't know if this is the perfect job for anyone to be having, where you don't get to have a break for meals. You don't have to have a break to sit down like 9 a.m. to 4 a.m. What are we doing for that amount of time? I mean, I understand. I've had friends in Hollywood who have been assistants for people who have, a lot of fame and they're A-listers. And those particular people had multiple assistants, right? Multiple assistants so that one was taking care of like travel and bookings and blah blah blah, and one was taking care of like the entertainment type of stuff, and one was taking care of like getting packages and stuff for like Christmas and things, and they had multiple assistants taking care of all that. I think Kim Kardashian, I thought that it was like she had multiple nannies, right? So now thinking about 9 a.m. to 4 a.m., he probably has multiple assistants. It's not just one assistant, right? So all of those people are running around doing all of his business during those hours. And it just seems like, wouldn't you want a staff that is, fully rested to take care of your business versus a staff that is worked and grinded down to the bone, probably to the point of making mistakes, right? So I would just say that this is not ideal for anybody to work 9 a.m. to 4 a.m. And what are you doing in the wee hours of the night? I don't know. I mean, a lot of times when you think about the record industry, a lot of people are recording well into the midnight hours, right? So whether or not she was participating in helping with that sort of function, maybe, but it just seems like a crazy, crazy kind of hours. It says that after he accused her of stealing jewelry, apparently, and she had like multiple lie detector tests after this, said that I was petrified, right? I can't imagine an employer giving you lie detector tests. Quote, I'm not getting a good reading. You need to. You're going to be in the East River if I can't get a good reading on this. I couldn't calm down, she said. And this was the guy administering the test, was saying, you're going to be in the East River? What? Like anybody who's threatening you while in the middle of a lie detector test, that has got to be crazy bonkers. Like I can't even imagine in being in that scenario. And that's probably why she had that stress-induced alopecia as she was testifying too. What are your thoughts on this? Because it just seems like a lot to sort of endure. She was at Def Jam apparently before she was an employee of P. Diddy's. A lot. It's a lot. But what are your thoughts? Tell me in the comments. The list of names, at least some of the headlines are accurate. escalates the vendetta against the college. And then this one, this was some sort of, I believe, tweet. We want to know who those foreign students are. Reasonable request since we are giving Harvard billions of dollars, but Harvard isn't exactly forthcoming. You know, there's a lot to unpack here with a lot of these sort of stories, one of which I think is interesting. Nancy Pelosi reveals a top Dem she thinks will run in 2028, and that person is Rahm Emanuel. And you might remember him from Barack Obama's administration. Now, I don't know if this is somebody that you would vote for. A lot of people have said, you know, they are still Team Kamala. Some people have said they are Team AOC. Some people even believe that Gavin Newsom will run. I mean, there's a lot of different options that will be kind of brought through the ringer, but Pelosi talking about Rahm Emanuel is very interesting to bring his name back into the spotlight. He has had his own sort of political turmoil, I believe, in Chicago. I think it was in Chicago, and correct me if I'm wrong. So we shall see. I hope that you have a fantastic Tuesday. These are some of the headlines that I thought we should talk about this morning. Don't forget to visit my community tab and take the poll for today. And there's tons of polls. If you have missed them, go ahead and do that. And I will see you guys tomorrow morning right here on YouTube Live. Yay! Who is Annabelle? Oh, she's a doll. Just Google Annabelle doll and it will all come up. It's like a horror movie. Okay, bye.